The classroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the lab equipment. It was supposed to be just another science period at Ridgeway High, but in a single moment, the air grew heavy with tension. Ms. Taylor, the new chemistry teacher, stood calmly at the front, explaining an experiment. Suddenly, a chair scraped violently against the floor. Jake Morrison, the school's notorious bully, tall, broad-shouldered, and feared by nearly everyone, stood up with a smirk that sent shivers through the room. He swaggered forward, mocking her tone, then in a shocking move, grabbed her throat with one large, rough hand. The entire class gasped. Time seemed to freeze. No one had ever dared lay hands on a teacher, but Jake was different. He thrived on control, intimidation, and the fear he planted in others. But what Jake didn't know, what no one in the class knew, was that Ms. Taylor wasn't just any teacher. Before becoming an educator, she had served in the military, leading combat missions, facing fear head-on, and surviving battles far harsher than the arrogance of a teenage bully. Her eyes didn't widen in fear. They narrowed with the precision of a soldier assessing a threat. In that split second, her mind switched gears. Calmly but firmly, she placed her hand on Jake's wrist. His smirk faltered. With a sudden, swift movement, she broke his grip, twisted his arm behind his back, and pinned him against the lab table in one fluid motion. The entire class went from shocked gasps to stunned silence. No one had ever seen Jake overpowered, certainly not by someone he thought was just a teacher. Jake struggled, furious, but her grip was iron. "You will never," she said in a low, commanding voice, "put your hands on another person like that again." Her tone wasn't just a warning. It was the voice of someone who had faced down danger, someone who had commanded respect on battlefields. The bully, for the first time in his life, looked afraid. The incident shook the school to its core. Word spread like wildfire, how Miss Taylor had taken down the biggest bully with nothing more than controlled strength and calm confidence. But what most students didn't see was what came after. Jake's parents, wealthy and influential, tried to spin the story, accusing Miss Taylor of using excessive force. They threatened lawsuits and demanded her firing. It was a new kind of battlefield, one fought not with fists or weapons, but with words, power, and manipulation. Miss Taylor faced the school board with the same courage she had carried in uniform. She didn't deny what she had done. Instead, she looked each member in the eye and explained, "I was attacked. And I stopped him without causing permanent harm. If I had let it continue, what message would that send to the other students? That bullies can do whatever they want without consequence." Her words cut through the room with sharp truth. Many teachers had feared Jake. Many students had suffered quietly. Now, finally, someone stood by. The lab smelled faintly of chemicals and chalk dust, the kind of ordinary classroom scent students barely noticed anymore. Miss Taylor adjusted her glasses as she carefully wrote the steps of the experiment on the board. To the students, she was the new teacher, quiet, professional, maybe even a little mysterious. She carried herself with a posture too straight, a walk too sharp, as though her body remembered years of discipline. Few ever questioned it. In the back of the class, Jake Morrison slouched in his chair, legs spread arrogantly wide, his friends laughing at his every muttered joke. Jake wasn't just a troublemaker. He was a storm in human form, the kind of boy teachers dreaded and students feared. With his father on the school board and his mother throwing her family's money around like a weapon, Jake had been untouchable for years. Detentions never stuck. Suspensions disappeared. Teachers who stood against him quietly transferred schools. And he thrived on that power. When Ms. Taylor asked him to stop disrupting the lesson, Jake rose slowly, his grin widening. "Or what?" he taunted, his voice loud enough to echo. The class grew quiet. A few students lowered their eyes, praying he wouldn't pick on them next. Jake stepped forward, towering over Miss Taylor, and before anyone could react, his hand shot out and closed around her throat. Gasps erupted around the room. The sound of dropped pens and stifled cries filled the air. To everyone's shock, Miss Taylor did not flinch. Her eyes locked on his with a calm intensity that froze him for a fraction of a second. Then, with lightning speed, she grabbed his wrist, twisted it down, and spun him toward the desk, pinning him in a hold so efficient and painful he couldn't move. The class sat in stunned silence, hearts pounding, as Jake, the invincible bully, was reduced to nothing more than a writhing boy gasping in her grip. Control, she said firmly, her voice steady, carrying the weight of command, is not about hurting others. It's about mastering yourself. She released him, and he stumbled backward, red-faced and furious. The students would remember that moment forever. The untouchable Jake had finally been touched and shattered. But the fight was far from over. Jake stormed out of class that day, humiliated, and his powerful parents immediately came after Miss Taylor. They called her violent, unfit, dangerous. They demanded her resignation and threatened to drag her name through the mud. At the hearing with the school board, Jake's father pounded the table. This woman attacked my son. She assaulted him in front of an entire classroom. Is this the kind of person you want teaching your children? Miss Taylor stood at the front of the room, spine straight, her voice calm but firm. She didn't deny what had happened. Your son put his hands on me first. I defended myself. And in doing so, I showed your children something they may never see again in their lives. That bullies can be stopped, no ma.